The communication chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with its usual mix of alien voices and electronic chatter. Counselor Vextai adjusted his translation device as another routine report scrolled across his screen. Trade disputes, border, negotiations, mining rights, the same boring paperwork that filled his days. Then the emergency beacon started screaming. The sharp, piercing sound cut through every conversation in the room. Vextai's 4 eyes widened as he saw the priority level flash red on his display. Emergency transmissions were rare. Emergency. Transmissions with this level of urgency were almost unheard of. "All stations, we have a priority distress signal," announced the duty officer, her tentacles dancing across her control panel. "Origin point is Sector 7G, Outer Rim territories." Vextai pulled up the sector map. The Outer Rim was mostly empty. Space, dotted with a few farming colonies and mining operations. Nothing important enough to cause this kind of alert. He opened the transmission file and began to listen. Static filled his headphones first, then a human voice broke through. The words were choppy and filled with panic. "This is New Eden Colony. Under attack. They came out of nowhere. Our defenses are gone. They're landing troops. Please, anyone who receives this, we have civilians here, women and children. They're not soldiers. Please help us." The transmission cut to static, then resumed. "They have some kind of energy weapons. Our shields are failing. Estimate maybe 2 hours before they break through our main compound. This is Marcus Webb, Colony Administrator. If anyone can hear this, we're sending our location data. Please." Another burst of static. Then, silence. Vextai leaned back in his chair. Humans. He remembered reading about them in his academy training. They had been involved in galactic affairs about a century ago, then suddenly disappeared, withdrew to their own space and cut off most contact with the Council. Some said they had given up on expansion. Others whispered they had found something better to do with their time. "Sir," called the duty officer, "we're having trouble with the location data. The signal contains some kind of encryption we don't recognize." Vextai frowned. "What kind of encryption?" "Unknown, sir. It's definitely not standard civilian emergency protocols. This is military-grade coding, but it's unlike anything in our databases." That was strange. The humans in the message sounded like farmers, not soldiers. Why would farmers have military encryption? "Run it through the historical archives," Vextai ordered. "Check everything we have on human communication systems." While the computers worked, Vextai listened to the message again. The humans sounded genuinely terrified. Whatever was happening on New Eden, it was real, but something about the transmission bothered him. The fear was real, but underneath it, there was something else. A kind of cold anger that made his scales prickle. "Sir, we have a match on the encryption," the duty officer called out. "But you're not going to like it." "What did you find?" "The code signature matches files from the Terran Defense Force, military communications from about 120 years ago." Vextai's blood went cold. The Terran Defense Force. Every student at the Galactic Academy learned about them, usually in classes titled Conflicts to Avoid at All Costs. The humans had been different back then. Aggressive, expansionist. Their military had carved through 3 different alien invasions like they were nothing. Then, suddenly, they had just stopped, pulled back to their own territory, disbanded their fleets. Or so everyone thought. "Are you sure about this match?" Vextai asked. 97% certainty, sir. The coding structure is identical to TDF emergency protocols." Vextai stared at the transmission data. If these were just farmers, why did they have TDF encryption? Unless they weren't just farmers. Unless the humans had never really withdrawn from the galaxy. Unless they had simply learned to hide better. "Sir, we're receiving additional signals," the duty officer reported, her voice tense. Automated responses to the distress call. They're coming from everywhere. What do you mean, everywhere? I mean exactly that, sir. Deep space monitoring stations that aren't on any of our charts. Stations that have been dark for decades are suddenly coming online, and they're all responding to that encryption signature. On the main display, tiny dots of light began appearing across the galaxy map. Each dot represented a signal source that had just activated. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all hidden in asteroid fields, nebulae, and empty space, where no one thought to look. "Get me a direct line to Council Command," Vextai ordered, his voice shaking slightly. Priority Alpha. As the connection established, Vextai watched more lights appear on the map. Whatever the humans had built during their century of isolation, it was vast, and it had all just woken up because of one distress call from a farming colony. The face of High Counselor Zephron appeared on his screen, the elderly alien's expression annoyed at being disturbed. "This better be important, Vextai." "Sir, we've received a distress call from human colonists under attack, but there's something else. The signal has triggered responses from hidden installations across the galaxy. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands." Zephran's annoyed expression quickly changed to concern. "Human installations? That's impossible. Our intelligence reports show they dismantled their military infrastructure decades ago." "Sir, I don't think they dismantled anything. I think they just hid it better." The High Counselor was quiet for a long moment, staring at the galaxy map that showed more and more signal sources coming online every minute. "What's the status of the colony under attack?" he finally asked. "Unknown, sir. We lost contact 20 minutes ago. But based on the message, they estimated 2 hours before their defenses failed completely." "And these hidden stations?" "They're all transmitting on the same frequency now, sir. Encrypted military communications. We can't break the code, but the traffic volume is enormous. It's like they're coordinating something." Zephron closed his eyes. "Contact the hegemony forces in that sector. Tell them to cease their attack immediately and withdraw." "Sir, the hegemony doesn't recognize council authority and—" "Contact them now!" Zephran roared. "Tell them they're about to start a war they can't win. Tell them they've just poked a sleeping monster. Tell them whatever you have to, but make them stop." The transmission ended, leaving Vextai staring at his screen. On the galaxy map, new signals were appearing every few seconds. The humans hadn't withdrawn from galactic affairs. They had been watching, waiting, building, and now something had threatened their people. Vextai thought about the stories from the old wars. Stories of human ships that moved faster than physics should allow, of weapons that could crack planets, of soldiers who fought like demons and never ever gave up. He looked at the transmission, timestamp from New Eden. The attack had started 3 hours ago. If the humans were coming, they would already be on their way. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, something ancient and terrible was stirring, and it was heading for the front. Lines of a war that the galaxy wasn't ready to fight. Deep in the asteroid belt of the Sol system, something that had been sleeping for 80 years began to wake up. The Cerberus station looked like just another piece of space rock from the outside. Its surface was pitted and scarred, covered with the kind of cosmic dust that made it invisible to most sensors. But inside its metal heart, lights were coming on for the first time in decades. Admiral Sarah Chen felt the vibration through the deck plates as the station's main reactor came online. She had been expecting this moment her entire life, trained for it since childhood. But now that it was here, she felt a cold knot in her stomach. "Admiral, we're receiving the activation codes now," reported Lieutenant Torres from his position at the communications console. "Authentication confirmed. This is not a drill." Sarah nodded and walked to the center of the command deck. Around her, officers who had been living normal civilian lives just hours ago were taking their positions at stations they knew by heart but had never used in anger. The Terran Defense Force had never really disbanded after the last Galactic War. It had simply gone to sleep. "Status report," she ordered. "Reactor at full power," called out Commander Martinez from engineering. "All systems green across the board." "Communications array is online," Torres added. "We're in contact with all primary and secondary command nodes. And the fleet? Shipyard 7 reports first wave vessels will be ready for deployment in 6 hours. Shipyard 12 estimates 8 hours for their capital ships." Sarah walked to the main display screen and watched as status reports came in from across human space. Hidden shipyards built inside asteroids and moons were bringing massive vessels online. Weapons platforms disguised as space debris were charging their main guns. And everywhere, people who had been teachers, farmers, engineers, and shopkeepers were remembering their other job, the job they had trained for but hoped they would never need. "Ma'am, incoming priority message from New Eden," Torres announced. It's bad." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was different from the first distress call. Younger, more desperate. "This is Jenny Webb. My father sent the first message. The compound has fallen. They have us trapped in the emergency bunkers. They're using some kind of gas to try to force us out. There are children down here. Please, if anyone is coming, hurry." The message dissolved into static. Sarah opened her eyes and saw her bridge crew staring at her. These were good people. People who had given up normal lives to serve as guardians for the human colonies scattered across the galaxy. People who understood that sometimes the price of peace was being ready for war. "Torres, get me a connection to Fleet Command," she said quietly. "Aye, ma'am." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of Admiral Jackson Reed. Sarah had served under him during the last war, back when she was just a lieutenant. Now he was the supreme commander of forces that most of the galaxy thought no longer existed. "Sarah," he said without preamble, "I assume you've heard the New Eden transmission." "Yes, sir. What's our response authorization?" "Full deployment. Everything we've got. The hegemony just declared war on humanity. They just don't know it yet." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. Full deployment meant revealing everything they had built during their decades of hiding. It meant showing the galaxy that humanity had not been sleeping peacefully in their corner of space. "Sir, that will expose our entire defensive network." "Good," Reed said grimly. "It's time the galaxy remembered why they should leave human colonies alone. How long until your task force is ready?" "First wave in 6 hours. Full deployment in 12. "Too long. Those people don't have 12 hours. Sarah looked at her tactical display. "Sir, we do have the rapid response units." Reed raised an eyebrow. "The Phantoms? Sarah? We've never used them in actual combat, but we've tested them extensively. They can reach New Eden in 4 hours. The Phantom ships were humanity's newest and most secret weapons, vessels that could slip between dimensions, moving faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were small, carrying only a few dozen crew members each, but they were equipped with weapons that could level cities." "Authorized," Reed said after a moment. "But Sarah, if you deploy the Phantoms, there's no going back. The galaxy will know we have technology they can't understand." "Sir, there are children in those bunkers." Reed smiled grimly. "That's what I wanted to hear. Execute Operation Righteous Fury. Show them what happens when someone threatens human civilians." The connection ended, and Sarah turned to her crew. They were all looking at her with expressions of grim determination. These people had families of their own scattered across human space. They understood what was at stake. "All stations, this is Admiral Chen," she announced over the ship-wide communications system. "We are implementing full war protocols. This is not a drill. As of this moment, humanity is at war with the hegemony forces that have attacked New Eden Colony. She paused, thinking of the children hiding in those bunkers. Our mission is simple. We protect our own. We bring our people home. And we make sure this never happens again. Around the bridge, officers began working with the smooth efficiency of people who had drilled for this moment their entire careers. Sarah walked to the tactical display and began selecting targets. Commander Martinez, bring the Phantom Squadron. Online. Aye, ma'am. How many ships? Sarah thought about the panicked voice of Jenny Webb, about children hiding in underground bunkers while alien soldiers tried to gas them out. All of them. Martinez whistled softly. Ma'am, that's overkill for one hegemony raiding force. Commander, when someone attacks human civilians, there is no such thing as overkill. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the soft beeping of status indicators. On the main screen, Sarah watched as hidden facilities across human space came online. Weapons that had been sleeping in the dark were powering up. Ships that existed only in classified files were preparing for launch. The hegemony had made a simple mistake. They had assumed that because humans were peaceful, they were weak. They had forgotten that sometimes the most dangerous enemies were the ones who fought only when they had no choice. Admiral, Phantom Squadron reports ready for deployment, Torres announced. Launch when ready, Sarah ordered, and send a message on all hegemony military frequencies. What should it say, ma'am? Sarah thought for a moment. Tell them they have 1 hour to withdraw from New Eden and release all human civilians unharmed. After that, we consider them enemy combatants to be dealt with accordingly. And if they don't respond? Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the Phantom ships beginning their impossible journey through folded space. Then they're about to learn why humanity spent a century building weapons instead of making friends. Commander Thekvar of the Hegemony War Fleet stared at the message that had just appeared on his command screen. He read it twice, then called his intelligence officer over. What do you make of this? He asked, pointing at the human transmission. Intelligence Officer Grixtall examined the message with his compound eyes. It appears to be some kind of joke, sir. The humans haven't had a military presence in this sector for decades, and yet they're giving us ultimatums. Sir, our intelligence reports show that human military capability is minimal. They have a few patrol ships, some outdated defense platforms, nothing that could threaten a hegemony battle group. Thekvar looked out at his fleet. 12 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and enough ground troops to occupy a dozen planets. The New Eden colony had fallen in less than 2 hours. Any rescue force the humans could send would be swept away like dust. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Ignore the human transmission. Continue operations as planned. What Thekvar didn't know was that his communications were being monitored by sensors he couldn't detect. Sensors that had been watching hegemony movements for months, waiting for exactly this kind of mistake. 50 light-years away, Captain. Elena Vasquez received the intelligence report aboard her Phantom ship, the Shadow Strike. Around her, the bridge crew worked in the dim red lighting that gave their vessels their name. Everything about the Phantom ships was designed to be invisible. From their hull materials that bent light around them to their engines that left no energy signature. Captain, we've just received confirmation, reported her tactical officer. The hegemony commander has refused our ultimatum. Elena nodded. She had expected as much. The hegemony had grown arrogant over the past century, used to bullying smaller civilizations without consequences. They had forgotten that humans were different. Time to target? She asked. 3 hours, 15 minutes. And the rest of the squadron? All ships report ready. We'll arrive in perfect formation. Elena looked at the tactical display showing the positions of her 12 ships. Each Phantom vessel carried enough firepower to level a city, but that wasn't what made them special. What made them special was that they could appear anywhere, anytime, without warning. Lieutenant Chen, patch me through to Admiral Chen on Cerberus Station. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the Admiral's calm face. Elena had served under Admiral Chen during the war games that tested the Phantom technology. She was the best tactical mind in the human fleet. Captain Vasquez, status report. We'll be in position in just over 3 hours, ma'am. The hegemony has refused to withdraw. Understood. What's your tactical assessment? Elena called up the enemy fleet disposition on her screen. 12 heavy cruisers in standard formation around the planet. They're not expecting any serious opposition. Their shields are down, their weapons are in standby mode. And the ground forces? Approximately 2,000 troops. They've secured the main colony, but our people are still holding out in the emergency bunkers. The hegemony is trying to force them out with gas attacks. Admiral Chen's expression hardened. Casualties. Unknown, ma'am. We lost contact with the surface 30 minutes ago. Elena watched the Admiral consider the tactical situation. Around them, the laws of physics bent as the Phantom ships traveled through folded space at speeds that should have been impossible. Human engineers had spent decades figuring out how to break the rules that limited other species. Captain, you are authorized to use whatever force necessary to secure the safety of human civilians. Show them what our technology can do. Understood, ma'am. What about prisoners? Any hegemony forces that surrender immediately will be treated according to galactic law. Any that continue to threaten civilians? Admiral Chen paused. Use your best judgment. The connection ended, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts. She had trained for this mission her entire career, but she had never expected it to actually happen. The Phantom ships were humanity's greatest secret, vessels that represented a century of focused research and development. Captain, incoming. Message from the surface, her communications officer announced. It's weak, but we're picking up a transmission from the emergency bunkers. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was barely a whisper, probably someone speaking directly into a short-range communicator. This is Marcus Webb. If anyone is receiving this, they've breached the outer bunker door. We're falling back to the inner chambers. Estimate maybe 1 hour before they break through. We have 43 civilians down here, including 12 children. The transmission cut off. Elena felt her jaw clench. 12 children. She thought of her own daughter back on Earth, safe in her school, never having to worry about alien soldiers breaking down her door. All ships, this is Shadow Strike, she broadcast to her squadron. New tactical priority, we have children in immediate danger. When we arrive, primary targets are any hegemony forces near the bunker complex. Acknowledged, Shadow Strike, came the reply from the other ships. Elena could hear the same cold anger in their voices that she felt in her own chest. The Phantom. Ships continued their impossible journey through folded space. Around them, the universe twisted and bent as human technology did things that alien scientists said were impossible. When they emerged, they would bring with them weapons that redefined what warfare meant. Captain, we're picking up more intelligence from our deep space monitoring network, her intelligence officer reported. The hegemony is moving additional forces toward human space. This isn't just a raid. They're planning something bigger. Elena studied the tactical reports flowing in from hidden sensors throughout the galaxy. The hegemony had been building up forces for months, preparing for what looked like a major offensive against human colonies. Get this information to Admiral Chen immediately, she ordered. If they want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. She looked at the countdown timer showing their arrival at New Eden. 2 hours and 47 minutes. 47 minutes for children to hide in underground bunkers while alien soldiers tried to kill them. Elena thought about the decades humans had spent preparing for this moment. The weapons they had built, the ships they had hidden, the technology they had developed in secret while the galaxy assumed they were weak and peaceful. The hegemony was about to learn the difference between being peaceful and being harmless. All stations prepare for combat deployment, Elena announced. In less than 3 hours, we're going to show them what happens when someone threatens human children. Around her, the bridge crew worked with deadly efficiency. These were people who had given up normal lives to serve as humanity's hidden guardians. They understood that sometimes the price of protecting the innocent was becoming something terrible yourself. The phantom ships raced through folded space toward New Eden, carrying with them the full fury of a species that had learned to fight wars among the stars. The phantom ships arrived at New Eden without fanfare or warning. One moment, the space around the planet was empty except for the hegemony fleet. The next moment, 12 impossible vessels materialized out of folded space like ghosts, becoming solid. Commander Thekvar was reviewing casualty reports when his sensor officer started screaming, "Sir, unknown contacts! 12 ships just appeared at point-blank range." Thekvar spun around to look at his tactical display. Where there had been empty space seconds before, 12 sleek black ships now hung motionless. They were unlike anything in his database, smooth, almost organic-looking hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Identification?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. They're not broadcasting any signals. They're just sitting there." "Weapons status?" "I can't get a reading on their armament, sir. Our sensors are showing conflicting data." Thekvar felt his first stirring of unease. Ships didn't just appear out of nowhere, and ships that could block hegemony sensors were not something his intelligence briefings had prepared him for. "Signal the fleet. Battle stations. Target those unknown vessels." As his fleet began to respond, Thekvar watched the mysterious ships on his display. They were smaller than his cruisers, but something about them made his scales itch. They hung, in space with the patient stillness of predators. Then they moved. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for the next 1,000 years, always with the same sense of awe and terror. The human ships didn't attack like normal vessels. They didn't launch missiles or fire energy beams. Instead, they seemed to flicker in and out of existence, appearing next to hegemony vessels for just long enough to deliver devastating strikes, then vanishing before return fire could reach them. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the battle from the bridge of Shadow Strike as her ships tore through the enemy fleet with surgical precision. The phantom vessels could phase in and out of normal space, making them effectively untouchable by conventional weapons. "Target the command ship," she ordered. "Disable engines and weapons, but keep life support intact. We want prisoners." "Acknowledged," her weapons officer replied. "Quantum torpedoes armed." The Shadow Strike flickered into existence directly, above the hegemony flagship. For 3 seconds, it existed in normal space long enough to fire 2 precisely aimed shots. The quantum torpedoes passed through the enemy ship's shields like they weren't there, detonating inside the engine room and weapons control. Then the Shadow Strike vanished again, leaving the enemy flagship dead in space. Around the fleet, the other phantom ships were executing similar attacks. Hegemony vessels found themselves crippled before they could even return fire. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration of technological superiority that bordered on the supernatural. "This is Captain Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force, Elena, broadcast on all hegemony frequencies. You have attacked human civilians. Your fleet is now disabled. Order your ground forces to withdraw immediately, or we will consider this a declaration of war against humanity." On the flagship, Commander Thekvar stared at his dead control panels in shock. His entire fleet had been neutralized in less than 10 minutes by vessels that shouldn't exist. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving surrender requests from 8 of our ships. The others aren't responding. Their communications arrays have been destroyed." Thekvar looked at his tactical display. Every one of his vessels was showing red damage indicators. Not destroyed, disabled. Someone had systematically taken apart his entire fleet with the precision of a surgeon. "Sir, what are your orders regarding the ground forces?" Thekvar thought about the 2,000 troops he had landed on New Eden. They were equipped with standard hegemony weapons and armor. If these human ships could do this to his fleet, what would they do to ground forces? Signal all surface units, he said quietly. Immediate withdrawal to the transport ships. Sir, what about the human prisoners? Release them. All of them. Now! The communications officer looked confused, but began transmitting the orders. Thekvar continued to stare at the tactical display showing the impossible human ships. He had heard stories about human military technology from the old wars, but he had assumed they were exaggerated. Apparently not. On the surface of New Eden, hegemony ground troops received their withdrawal orders with confusion and relief. The human colonists had been harder to subdue than expected, and several units had taken casualties from improvised defenses. Major Krextal looked at his orders with disbelief. Withdraw? We just got here. Orders are orders, his sergeant replied. Fleet Command wants everyone back on the transports immediately. What about the prisoners? Release them. All of them. As the hegemony troops began their withdrawal, the emergency bunkers of New Eden slowly opened. 43 human civilians emerged into daylight, blinking and afraid but alive. Marcus Webb was the first to see the strange black ships hanging in orbit above their world. They were beautiful in a deadly way, like sharks made of shadow and starlight. Jenny, he called to his daughter, are you getting this on the communicator? Jenny Webb activated their emergency transmitter with shaking hands. This is New Eden Colony. We're okay. The hegemony forces are withdrawing. There are ships in orbit, but we don't know who they are. The response came immediately, in a calm female voice with a slight accent. New Eden Colony, this is Captain Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force. You are safe. Medical and relief ships are en route. The threat to your colony has been neutralized. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. The Terran Defense Force. He had heard stories from his grandfather about the legendary human military, stories he had assumed were myths. Captain, he transmitted back, thank you. How did you get here so fast? There was a pause before. The response came. Mr. Webb, humanity has been watching over its colonies for a very long time. We've just been doing it quietly. In orbit, the Phantom ships maintained their positions as hegemony transports lifted off from the planet's surface. Elena watched the evacuation with grim satisfaction. Every enemy soldier was leaving. Every human civilian was safe. Captain, her intelligence officer reported, we're intercepting hegemony military communications. They're requesting emergency reinforcements. It looks like they're planning a counterattack. Elena smiled coldly. Let them come. Admiral Chen will want to give them a proper demonstration of human hospitality. She looked at the tactical display showing the disabled hegemony fleet. These ships would be returned to their government along with a message that would make it very clear what happened to anyone who threatened human civilians. Signal. Admiral Chen, she ordered. Mission accomplished. New Eden is secure. And I think it's time to show the galaxy what we've been building while they thought we were sleeping. The Phantom ships began to fade from normal space, becoming invisible once again. But their message had been delivered with devastating clarity. Humanity was back, and they were no longer interested in being ignored. 3 weeks after the New Eden incident, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the assembled Galactic Council in their great chamber on Nexus Prime. The curved walls rose high above her, filled with the representatives of hundreds of species, all staring, down at the human who had just changed everything. High Counselor Zephyron looked older than when she had last seen him, his scales dulled with stress. The hegemony incident had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Every government was reassessing their intelligence reports on humanity. Admiral Chen, Zephyron began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, the Council has asked you here to explain the events at New Eden Colony. Specifically, the appearance of human military vessels that our sensors could not detect. Sarah looked up at the gallery of alien faces. Some showed curiosity, others fear, and a few showed what might have been respect. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, she felt the weight of representing her entire species. "Honorable counselors," she began, her voice clear and steady, "humanity has never hidden our military capabilities. We simply chose not to display them unnecessarily." A ripple of whispers went through the chamber. Counselor Vextai leaned forward in his seat. "Admiral, our intelligence services reported that humanity had dismantled its military forces after the last war. Are you saying our intelligence was wrong?" Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Counselor, your intelligence services saw exactly what we wanted them to see. Humanity learned long ago that the best way to avoid war is to be so prepared for it that no one wants to start one." She activated a holographic display that showed the positions of monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Thousands of tiny lights appeared, each representing a human outpost that had been hidden for decades. For the past century, humanity has been watching, learning, preparing. We have monitoring stations in every sector, shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, and response fleets ready to deploy at a moment's notice. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Several counselors were frantically consulting with their aides, trying to understand how their governments had missed such a massive military buildup. "The question before this council," Sarah continued, "is what happens next. The hegemony attacked human civilians. They have since issued demands for the return of their captured fleet and threatened retaliation against human colonies." High Counselor Zephron raised a hand for silence. "Admiral, the hegemony claims their attack on New Eden was a misunderstanding. They were pursuing pirates who had raided their territory." Sarah's expression hardened. "With respect, High Counselor, the hegemony invaded a peaceful farming colony and attempted to gas children hiding in emergency bunkers. There was no misunderstanding." She activated another display showing footage from New Eden's security cameras. The council watched in uncomfortable silence as hegemony troops systematically destroyed civilian infrastructure and fired on unarmed colonists. "Humanity has always believed in proportional response," Sarah said as the footage ended. "But we also believe in absolute protection of our civilians." Counselor Vextai stood up. "Admiral, what exactly is humanity proposing?" Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of worlds. These people represented civilizations that had grown soft during the long peace, unused to the realities of warfare. "We propose a new understanding. Humanity will continue to monitor galactic events from our hidden stations. We will continue to maintain our defensive capabilities, and we will respond immediately and decisively to any threat against human civilians or our allies." "And if the hegemony refuses to accept this?" Sarah's smile was cold as winter starlight. "Then they will discover what a real war with humanity looks like." The holographic display changed to show the current disposition of human military forces. Battle fleets that had been hidden for decades were now visible on sensors throughout the galaxy. Massive construction shipyards were building vessels that dwarfed anything the Council had ever seen. The forces that responded to New Eden represented less than 1% of humanity's total military capability, Sarah explained calmly. "We have been preparing for war for a century. We hope never to use these preparations, but we will not hesitate if our people are threatened." A hegemony representative stood up in the gallery, his voice shaking with anger. "This is outrageous! Humanity cannot simply dictate terms to the rest of the galaxy?" Sarah turned to look at him directly. "Representative, 3 weeks ago your military attacked a farming colony and tried to murder children. Today, your government is demanding the return of ships that were used in that attack. I think humanity has been quite reasonable in our response." She activated one final display, showing a recording from the battle at New Eden. The Council watched as phantom ships materialized out of nothing and systematically disabled an entire hegemony fleet without destroying a single vessel. Humanity could have destroyed every ship in that fleet, Sarah said quietly. We chose not to. We could have retaliated against hegemony worlds. We chose not to. We could have begun systematic strikes against hegemony military installations. We chose not to. The chamber was completely silent now. But understand this, Sarah continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. Our restraint should not be mistaken for weakness. If the hegemony or any other power chooses to continue threatening human civilians, they will discover that humanity can be far less charitable than we have been. High Counselor Zephron was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical displays, showing human military strength. Admiral Chen, what assurance can you give the Council that humanity will not use its military superiority to dominate other species? Sarah thought of the children who had been hiding in the bunkers of New Eden. She thought of the farmers and teachers and engineers who had been forced to take up arms to defend their homes. She thought of the human colonies scattered across the galaxy, peaceful people who just wanted to live their lives without fear. High Counselor, humanity has no interest in conquest or domination. We are farmers and scientists and artists who happen to be very good at building weapons when we need to. All we want is for our people to be safe. She paused, looking around the chamber one more time. But we will not allow anyone to threaten that safety. Ever. The council session ended with a vote to formally censure the hegemony and establish new protocols for protecting civilian colonies. The hegemony representative stormed out, promising that his government would not accept human demands. As Sarah left the chamber, Counselor Vexatai approached her. Admiral, do you really think the hegemony will back down? Sarah looked out through the great windows of Nexus Prime at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, hidden monitoring stations were tracking every ship movement in the galaxy. Weapons platforms disguised as asteroids were calculating firing solutions, and the crews of vessels that shouldn't exist were waiting for orders. Counselor, I hope they will, for their sake. She walked away, leaving Vextai staring out at the stars and wondering what other secrets humanity had hidden in the darkness between worlds. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson at New Eden. Humanity was not the peaceful, withdrawn species they had appeared to be. They were guardians who had been watching from the shadows, waiting for the moment when someone would be foolish enough to threaten their people. That moment had come and gone. Now everyone knew the price of making such a mistake. In the depths of space, the hidden monitoring stations continued their eternal watch, staffed by humans who had chosen exile to serve as early warning systems for their species. They were the first line of defense for a civilization that valued peace above all things. But they were also the guardians of a war machine that could reshape the galaxy if it was ever fully awakened. The message was clear to anyone with the wisdom to understand it. Humanity would protect its own, no matter the cost, and they had spent a century making sure they could do exactly that. The sleeping giant was awake now, and it was watching.